Hi guys! Today we're going to check out how to integrate Doctrine ORM into Pimcore. For this I have a locally installed Pimcore instance running on Docker. If you want to learn how to do this, check out our other videos on YouTube or on pimcorecast.com. Right now it's already up and running here on my local instance. I'm already connected to the Docker instance, so I can start right away. First, we need to require with Composer the Symfony ORM pack, like so. I already have this installed, so it's a little bit quicker for the video, but you just have to accept the installation and you should be good to go. After this, there's another bundle we're gonna require, but in development only, the Symfony Maker bundle already installed here. To make it quicker again, but you just have to execute Composer, require, only in dev, Symfony Maker bundle. This will enable us to use the make command to create our entities. While this is running, we can start editing our configuration for our database here in the database YAML, usually located in config local database YAML. Of course, you can put this somewhere else if you know what you're doing. Sometimes it's all in one line. I just like to split it up and remove some braces and remove the semicolon, the colons at the end. The default connection we can leave as is, assuming that your Pimcore is working. We're just gonna create an anchor here for our default connection, so we can reuse this down here and create a second connection we're gonna call app. We're gonna use the anchor we set up there using those two arrows and semicolon. Then we need to use a schema filter. This will ensure that this connection will only edit the tables it is allowed to. Those are limiters. Now it should start with app underline, which is going to be our prefix for our tables. And it also needs access to our migration versions table, which is from Pimcore. Now the connections are set up, we can create our ORM configuration. First, we're gonna set our auto generate proxy classes. You can use true. I like to use a kernel variable %kernel debug, so it's only true in the debug environment. Now we're gonna define our default entity manager as default, and now we have to create our entity managers. First one is default, and all default will have is the connection defined as default, which is up here. This ensures that Pimcore is running as usual using the default connection with the default entity manager for our migrations. Nothing else is necessary. We're only gonna create a second entity manager called app. This one's gonna use the app connection, and we create our mapping. App namespace, it is not a bundle. The directory is defined as such. %kernel project source entity. Prefix is gonna be app entity. This is the namespace. Alias is app, correct. And our type is not annotation, it's attribute. Now our entity managers for ORM are set up. Let's save this. And we're also gonna need to create this folder that we defined over here. Let's go to a project, source folder, new directory entity. Seems like I already created this one. If you don't have it, please create it. After this configuration, we're also gonna have to enable our maker bundle so we can use it. It's gonna be in config bundles.php. Enter Symfony bundle, maker bundle, double colon class, all true. So it's enabled. Can close this out. And we're gonna need to define our migration. For this, we create a YAML file inside of config packages. New file. Let's call it Doctrine Migrations. Doesn't matter how you call it, just make sure it's a .yaml file. It will be auto-loaded. Here we're gonna define the configuration for Doctrine Migrations. Gonna set migrations paths. This one's already correct. App migrations namespace in the project directory, source migrations. And now the important part, we're gonna define the default entity manager, so it's working as is and using the default connection, but we need to disable the connection configuration Pimcore usually uses. This way, Pimcore is still working as before. We just need to create our migrations table, again in source migrations. I already did this. Please make sure the table is there or you will get an error. Now we're set up. Let's clear our cache and regenerate our autoload. Composer install is the quickest way for me. After this is done, we can use the make command and create our first entity. Okay, bin console, make entity. Let's create product. It's gonna have a name, which will be a string. 255 length is in okay. It's not gonna be nullable. We're also gonna add a description, which is gonna be longer, so let's use text. This is gonna be nullable. We also need a price. This should be a decimal. Decimal with length 10 should be fine. How many decimals we're gonna use? Let's use 4 for precision, so it leaves 6 for our value. Perfect, and this should not be nullable. We're not gonna sell stuff for free. Let's hit return again to tell the make command that we're done adding properties, and it created our entity. Here in the entity folder, there's product. There's also the repository created down here, but we don't have to do anything with this. In the product PHP, however, we're gonna define the table. Since we defined that we're gonna need a prefix for our table, we're gonna name this as such app underline products. With this, our configuration is complete. The fields are added by the make command, and we can execute our migration diff command. We're not gonna use the make migration command as suggested here. This does not allow you to define the entity manager to use, and also it will use the first migration path defined in migrations path, but you can never be sure that this is going to be your app migrations. If you use the bin console debug config, you can check this. Doctrine migrations paths. And you see the e-commerce framework migrations would be the first migrations paths, and it's gonna create our migration inside this bundle, which would not be correct. Therefore, we're gonna use the bin console doctrine migrations diff command, because here we're gonna define our entity manager as app and also our namespace. It's gonna be app migrations double backslash for escaping. Executing this will create our first migration inside this folder, and when you use the up command, it's gonna create the table app products with these fields down is also defined down here. So we can use the Doctrine migrations migrate command just to check database tables. Let's go up here, no app table. Let's execute. We want to make the changes, and if we reload our database, there's our app products table as defined. Why are we complicating everything using 2 entity managers and 2 connections and so on? The diff command actually would delete all of your Pimcore tables if you don't tell him to ignore these using the schema filter. And you need to use an entity manager to define in your Doctrine migrations to use the diff command, or else he won't be able to find the schema, which is defined down here with the mappings. And that's why we do it this way. Now that you're set up, you can create your own entities, create your migrations, and you can also use the rest of the documentation of Symfony to persist objects, just instantiate them, use the entity manager to persist them, also fetching objects. Using the entity manager, you can get the repository with the class, you can use the find by ID command, and so on and so forth. If you have suggestions for videos you want to see, please go to pimcorecast.com. Just send us a contact using the form in pimcorecast.com. The contact form is right here. And I hope to see you in the next video.